Hey, what's up guys? So today we're going to be talking about The Amazing Spider-Man number 33. Just as a heads up, I will outright be talking about the comic book itself, so a spoiler warning ahead, and at the end I will be giving my thoughts and opinions, so if you enjoyed this at any point, make sure to like and subscribe, and without further ado, let's begin. The beginning of our story this time is with Peter. He's dressed as Spider-Man, and without his mask on, he's back at his apartment, just sitting on a couch, just thinking to himself. The weather outside is rainy and full of lightning, to signify that our new Spider-Man right now isn't the Spider-Man that we know. And if you guys recall from the previous issue, the last time we left Peter, he was recently impaled by Kraven's spear, which had been imbued by the Green Goblin's sins. Now, naturally, we believe that he's gonna turn into some form of the Green Goblin, but in this issue, he really plays the villain character. As he sits on the couch with lightning going off in the background, a spider crawls onto him, and he squishes it. As he does that, he's just narrating to himself how he's literally just not gonna become the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man anymore. Dialogue's a bit kinda cringe, but the artwork is doing it for me. After squishing the spider, Spider-Man gets up and he goes to his closet, and it looks like he's picking out one of his black suits. And for the majority of the intro, it's basically just establishing Peter Parker as the actual villain. Or better yet, Spider-Man. After seeing the cover of the comic, I was wondering like, whoa, are they gonna introduce Venom in some form? But no, Spider-Man just walks over to his closet, and now that he's feeling like a villain, he decides to put one of his black suits on. I suppose he just has them for whenever he feels like snapping. Afterwards, we skip over to Norman Osborn's perspective, and it looks like he rushed over to Peter's apartment, incredibly worried of course. And this is where they allude a possible second voice that's been going on in Norman's head, because the entire time he's just by himself, and he has a regular thought bubble box, but then he has another one, and that one's darker green, which I'm assuming that's just signifying that's his Green Goblin voice. But before I do move on ahead, I did forget to mention that in the beginning of the story, where Spider-Man's just sitting there and he changes into his black suit, he also has another thought bubble that's just different from the one he naturally has. But anyways, Norman does make it to Peter's apartment, and he rushes in, notices the door's unlocked, but Peter's not there. He's trying to convince himself that he's just naturally out, possibly saving the day from a random crime, but he notices that he left his red suit behind, and he's just left there wondering where Peter's at. And then we skip over to Kraven, who's looking at a portrait of his father, and he's thinking to himself about how he had to run from Spider-Man. Instinctively, he knows he's prey now, but we also get established now that he also has a second voice in his head. So now we're dealing with three crazy motherfuckers. So let's see how this is gonna go. Kraven does try convincing himself that he's the hunter. He can't be the prey. He walks over to his armory and tries getting himself equipped, but his mind is like totally blank. He can't figure out what weapons to choose. Everything feels a little heavy. It looks like just by the artwork he does end up fighting a weapon, but I'm not sure if that was intentional, because it looks like they just recreated one of the Amazing Spider-Man covers, specifically issue 294 if you're following the legacy numbering. And on that cover, Spider-Man's sneaking up behind Kraven, and that's exactly what's happening right now. Kraven gets cut off guard, and Spider-Man looks like he injects him with something, similar to how Kraven did Spider-Man in the Kraven Last Hunt storyline. This is just a recreation, but with the roles reversed. Now Kraven plays the prey part, and he drops everything because he's a coward and starts running away from Spider-Man. As he runs, he looks back and thinks to himself, I am Kraven the Hunter. He gets cut off by Spider-Man, who's just looking diabolical, and he's yelling at him, run! As Kraven runs relentlessly through the forest, he's thinking to himself, I am the gazelle, hobbled by the father's sins. His second voice says, say it, and his regular inner voice says, I am Kraven the Hunted, effectively breaking a freaking character. He manages to hide in a sewer tunnel, and his inner monologue starts thinking to himself how he feels how every animal he has hunted in the past feels. Spider-Man catches up to him, pins him down, and he says, I can't believe I was ever scared of you. I can't believe I let you get away with what you did for all these years, walking around like you didn't bury me alive. Once again, referring to Kraven's Last Hunt storyline. And Kraven says, I'm not my father. Spider-Man follows it up by saying, close enough. and tosses him aside. Now at this point, if you didn't read the issue or know what the hell is even going on, I suppose this is just Kraven Jr. That's the best way I can describe him. And Spider-Man, who's just now a huge villain, doesn't see the difference. He wants to act out his revenge for getting buried alive. After Kraven gets tossed by Spider-Man, he's now a pretty good distance away, and Kraven's just thinking to himself, he let me go. But his second voice says, don't be a fool. And Kraven is acknowledging how he's just playing with his food. Kraven ends up finding access to the sewers underground, and that's how he tries getting away from Spider-Man. He's trying to convince himself that this is just a way to take away Spider-Man's advantage by, of course, being in the sewer and not having the open space that he typically does. But his second voice is trying to convince him otherwise, telling him this is what Spider-Man wants. At this point, he's very broken down and inevitably gives in and starts thinking like Prey. He wants to get distance and set up some confusing tracks, and he just walks through the sewers. At some point, Kraven does hear a voice saying, stop, you've gone far enough for the serum to work. Kraven says, my blood is hardened by fire. I don't feel a thing. We can assume that the voice Kraven's talking to is Spider-Man, of course. And Spider-Man says, it's not supposed to work on you. And this is where we get revealed a ton of vermin villains showing up. It looked like what Spider-Man injected the Kraven with wasn't actually supposed to do anything besides just have him sweat it through and have his pheromones attract the vermin. Now the vermin, upon looking at Kraven, recognize him from the Last Hunt storyline. They claim how he's not gonna hurt them anymore. The vermin are large in numbers now. I don't know how they came to be. I remember reading stories where Spider-Man would legitimately have trouble fighting this vermin character, and it would just be one. Now there's like a ton of them. And just to give you more of a mental image over what these vermin look like, they're very rat humanoid looking creatures. They all gain up on Kraven, and Kraven's thinking to himself, the vermin my father bested. The spider brought me here to fail where my father succeeded. Kraven does get overpowered at one moment, and his second voice starts saying, there are too many. Lie down and die. But as he's getting ganged up on, he does see Spider-Man just hanging there and enjoying him struggle. And Kraven's thinking to himself with his regular voice, I see you watching, Spider. I will not fall. I will not fall. And he starts overpowering the vermin and continues, I am my father's son. The second voice in his head says, yes. Kraven here seems to be putting up quite a fight, but unfortunately the vermin do overpower him, as Spider-Man just hangs there watching him struggle. Upon fully getting overpowered though, Spider-Man grabs one of the vermin, and this is a particularly disgusting panel because as Spider-Man grabs the vermin, bedbugs just fly off of him. Ugh. Upon grabbing him, though, he tosses him out of the way. Another vermin turns over to look at him and says, Spider! Spider-Man proceeds to punch him in his face and breaks his teeth. That part actually got a pretty good laugh out of me. Somehow, Spider-Man is able to actually defeat some of these vermin enough to scare them away. I'm assuming modern-day vermin just aren't that tough. They're probably just the Swarm character that we just got to see in this issue. Kraven now left unconscious, Spider-Man just grabs him by the fur coat and starts dragging him away. The next page, Kraven starts slowly waking up and he's feeling rain on his face. And all he's able to see is a silhouette of Spider-Man with lightning behind him, tossing him a rifle, telling him, here's this, in case you want to skip to the end. Since Kraven is now trying to come out of unconsciousness, he starts slowly realizing, dude, I'm gonna get buried alive. But before he can do anything, I don't even think he can even move. Spider-Man shuts the coffin door and says, pretty damn fine day. Spider-Man with his shovel begins to grab some of the dirt from the pile and he starts tossing it into the hole with the coffin, burying Kraven alive. And we're left on a to be continued from that point. So what do I think about the comic book itself? Well, let's see here. The intro itself had one of the most goofiest setups. The artwork is definitely what does it for me though. But after the previous issue where Spider-Man gets impaled, you'd expect him to like be the Green Goblin, but he's not. But then again, he also has that second voice in his head that only gets established in this beginning section. He doesn't actually get that again. We don't really follow his perspective anyways. And then Norman also has his second voice, but so far nothing really has happened to Norman besides actually getting injected by Dr. Octopus in the previous arc. So the real question here is, has Norman always been hearing that Green Goblin voice and just been ignoring it, or has it recently popped up up since he got injected by Dr. Octopus. We can only really wait and see on that one. And then there's Kraven's second voice. Now we do get quite a bit of thought bubbles from Kraven himself, and then of course there's that second voice, which I believe it to just be his dad's voice talking to him. And of course, with the theme of all these characters going crazy, he's also one of these crazy motherfuckers. The entire time Kraven is trying to become the hunter, or at least attempt, but he certainly does feel like the prey in this issue. And he only feels like that because of the last time he saw Spider-Man, where he's just laughing maniacally, and apparently his instincts told him to run. His second voice is definitely very degrading towards him, but he does try fighting it a few times. And then the recreation of the Amazing Spider-Man cover from issue 294 using this art style, ooh, that was chef's kiss. Although not so much, because immediately after the dude cowered and dropped his gun and like booked it, Spider-Man was too scary. I definitely see where they're going with this, where Spider-Man just tries getting revenge on this character because out of the blue he's just an asshole. But as Kraven's running away, damn, do they break the Kraven character here. The Spider-Man dialogue itself feels totally unbearable, but he's very quiet the entire issue because he's just trying to be menacing, and that heavily works for that character in this issue. Besides that, I really don't like how Spider-Man talks in this. I definitely enjoy the story being told through Kraven's perspective though, because I can't tolerate Spider-Man's dialogue. Even though Kraven really just gets very simple quotes, nothing really too deep to dive into, more so you just sort of assume things. But even so, it's still better than tolerating Spider-Man's dialogue. I really did like the part where Kraven's getting beat up by the vermin. He's definitely having a hard time through it, but he sort of brings out like a Spider-Man vibe through it, where he simply just refuses to get taken down, even though his second voice is like telling him to just kill over, dog. He does overpower that voice for a moment and the vermin, and he claims himself to be Kraven. Unfortunately, that didn't last quite long. He did get overtaken and then dragged by Spider-Man to get buried alive, but that single moment was pretty cool. And that's basically it for this issue of The Amazing Spider-Man number 33. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.